Welcome back. If you're new here, I'm Harlan, and this is my story. Zen and the Art of Overspray, a body man's wild ride. My true life adventures in a world of custom cars, paint fumes, dank bars, and fast women. And how I found my Zen in the isolation of a spray booth, one paint job at a time. Hope you enjoy the ride. I damn sure did. Chapter 6, A Life in Paint and Metal. Wyatt had been learning to weld and fabricate for years, but painting was a different beast. It required patience, control, and an eye for detail he hadn't quite developed yet. His first attempt was rough. The paint gun sputtered, and instead of a smooth, even coat, the panel looked like it had been rained on. Harlan chuckled. "Looks like a Dalmatian," Wyatt sighed. "It's harder than it looks." "Everything worth doing is," Harlan said, grabbing the gun from Wyatt's hand. "Let me show you something." Wyatt watched as Harlan moved with effortless precision, misting a perfect coat over the panel. "You make it look easy," Wyatt muttered. Harlan smiled, but there was something distant in his expression. "That's 'cause I've been doing this longer than you've been alive." Wyatt glanced at him. "How'd you start?" Harlan hesitated, then set the paint gun down. "Lost my dad when I was 12. It was just me and my mom after that. We got by, but it wasn't easy." Wyatt hadn't expected that. Harlan never talked about himself much. "My next-door neighbor ran a body shop," Harlan continued. "I'd hang around after school, sweeping floors, taking out the trash, whatever he needed. One day, he let me sand a panel. The next, I was taping off trim. By the time I was 14, I painted my first hot rod." Wyatt raised an eyebrow. 14? Harlan smirked. "Didn't say it was good, but I never stopped." He leaned back, staring at the half-finished car in front of them. "I learned metalwork the same way. Spent my teens soaking up knowledge from anybody who'd talk to me. Shop techs, my boss's old buddies, even the paint suppliers. Figured if I kept my mouth shut and my ears open, I'd learn something useful." Wyatt nodded. He understood that. He'd done the same thing with Harlan. Harlan patted the panel. "Now, you ready to stop making excuses and learn how to do this right?" Wyatt grinned. "Yeah, show me." Chapter 7, The Student's Progress. As the weeks went on, Wyatt's skills began to sharpen, and the mistakes became fewer. He still couldn't get the smooth finish that Harlan could, but he was getting closer. He studied every move the old man made, paying attention to the way Harlan prepped, mixed, and applied the paint with almost a painter's grace. Every action was deliberate, yet fluid. It wasn't just the paint, though. Wyatt could see how Harlan's entire approach to work had shaped his life. It wasn't just about the job. It was a passion that ran through everything he did. From the meticulous care he took in sanding a panel, to the hours spent mixing custom colors to match a vintage Corvette's original shade, Harlan's precision and dedication were evident in every corner of the shop. Wyatt found himself staying later and later at the shop, even when there was no work to be done. He'd sit in the corner, watching Harlan work, asking questions, soaking in whatever advice he could. It felt less like a job now and more like a calling. One evening, as Harlan cleaned his brushes, Wyatt looked at him, unsure of how to phrase the question that had been on his mind. "You ever think about teaching again?" Wyatt asked. Harlan glanced up, wiping his hands on a rag. "Teaching? In what, a classroom?" "Nah, like you used to. I mean, you've got a lot of knowledge. There's got to be a way to pass it down." Harlan shrugged. "I passed down what I could. My way of teaching is more hands-on than lecturing." Wyatt smiled. "I'm starting to get that." "Well, maybe I'm starting to get something too," Harlan said with a grin. "You've got more than just metalwork in your veins. You got the painting bug too. The way you've been paying attention, I can see it." Wyatt felt a sense of pride, though he wasn't sure if it was the paint job or something deeper that Harlan was acknowledging. Chapter 8, A Bond Strengthened. It had been a few months since Wyatt had started painting under Harlan's guidance, and a few things had changed in his life. He and his wife, Jessica, had moved into a new house with a small but growing family. He still worked the union job to support them, but now there was a new space, his dream shop, where he could practice, work on his own builds, and explore the art of painting. But as busy as his life had become, Wyatt always found time to return to Harlan's shop. One evening, after finishing a complicated fender, Wyatt sat with Harlan as the older man cleaned his tools. They were quiet for a while, the sound of the rag against metal the only noise in the room. "You ever think about hanging it up?" Wyatt asked, surprising himself. Harlan paused, then glanced at him. Hanging it up? You know, retiring, or slowing down. Harlan chuckled softly. Son, I've been slowing down for years, but the truth is, you don't retire from this life. It's in your blood. Even when you can't bend over a frame like you used to, you still find ways to make it work. I'll keep working till I can't anymore. Wyatt nodded, the weight of Harlan's words settling in. There was a truth to them, a realization that the things they loved, the things they built with their hands, were more than just work. They were a part of who they were. So, Wyatt began, what's next? Harlan raised an eyebrow. For you or for me? Wyatt smiled. Both. Harlan leaned back and crossed his arms. For you, I think it's time to start mixing your own colors. You've got the skills now, but you got to start bringing yourself into your work. And as for me, he paused, looking out at the shop, the place that had been his life for decades. I think I've got a few more cars left in me. Wyatt grinned. Yeah, I bet you do. Harlan smirked. And don't forget, kid, I'm still learning from you too. Wyatt's heart warmed at that. He'd always thought of himself as the student, but somewhere along the way, things had shifted. They were both teachers now.